Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, August 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game in 16 days. The game against Michigan in exactly 100 days. I'm realizing now I should have said Thursday, August 17th, 2023, because of course, 2023, Tony, the year of the tight end. And what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about tight ends. Got to talk to Keenan Bailey, Cade Stover, G. Scott, Joe Royer. So a good cross-section of that tight end room and the guys who are probably the most likely to make a significant impact on this year's team, at least maybe excluding Jelani Thurman, who we don't get to talk to. They're freshmen yet, generally. So of the guys who we're going to get to talk to, those are the guys I think we were most interested in talking to today. And let's, I guess, start with the injury news, which is good news for once, as far as injury news goes this time of year. Joe Royer, who had been a little banged up, and it wasn't anything serious, it sounds like he is back out there and making his case for a role as maybe tight end number 2 on this year's team.
Yeah, I think Keenan Bailey at one point was asked if Joe was back and how he's doing. He said he's doing pretty well. He just had a big catch towards the end of practice down the field, and then on the next play he was blocking a defensive end. So, that's the expectations, as Ryan Day and everybody here says. You've got to catch the ball like a receiver and block like an offensive tackle. And Cade Stover even talked about how it's easier for him now to run down the field 50 yards and then come back down on the next play and pass block. And something that takes some time. So the fact that Royer is back healthy, able to do that, I think is big news for the Buckeyes, as they obviously want to play more than 2 tight ends. They definitely want to play more than 1. And if they've got 3 that they can trust, then you can put them in any order.
Yeah, and with as much as they play the 2 tight end sets, how often we see the 12 personnel for Ohio State, that's something that Ryan Day has talked a lot about, wanting the 12 personnel on the field because it helps them in the run game. Well, you got to have at least 2 and maybe more than 2 in order to be able to play 2 at a time. It sounds like they're shaping up to at least have those 3 guys right now. After that, things get a little murky because there is some not great news on the injury front. This is not really news, but Zach Herbstreit, who was further down the depth chart, walk-on, son of Kirk Herbstreit, he had a heart condition that got diagnosed over the summer, identified, and he is out, for the foreseeable future. Keenan Bailey talked about him being basically an extra GA for them at this point, where he's just really contributing in terms of helping guys get ready and film study and that kind of stuff, because he can't do it on the field, so he's staying involved in any way he can. Bennett Christian, of course, we found out earlier this week, suspended for the season. Keenan Bailey's talked about the fact that this happened in January, and he has been since that happened, he has just been a great teammate and stayed involved, and he can do everything except for play in the games on Saturday. So he and Herbstreit are in a little bit of a different situation, but both of them sound like they're kind of making the best of a bad situation in both cases.
Yeah, 2 very different situations, but I think both of them speak to the culture that has been built here and it's cultivated, where you have 2 guys that know they aren't going to play, helping in any way they can and helping the best ways that they can. The fact that you've got Bennett Christian out there doing everything in practice and helping the defense get better, basically, by having himself out there and obviously working on himself, and saying there being no letdown in terms of, well, I'm not going to play this year, so why do I need all-out effort? And the fact that he's given it speaks to him, the culture, and then of course Zach Herbstreit just wanting to help and however he can, and right now that's by being an extra pair of hands, a pair of eyes, that sort of thing on the sidelines, helping out his room. And it's a room that can use whatever help you got, because they've got, it's top heavy at this point, and so if you got other guys that can help out different ways, that's a bonus.
Well, and the top heavy portion of that room is Cade Stover, and Cade Stover, Keenan Bailey described him as a guy who was playing linebacker in the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago, which it feels like he's been at tight end a lot longer than that, but he's kind of bounced around. I think he came in, I'm gonna get the combination mixed up. It was like a linebacker, then a defensive lineman, then a tight end, then a linebacker again, and then a tight end, I believe. So he's kind of bounced around a little bit. He actually had an NFL draft decision to make at the end of last year. And were you around when Keenan Bailey was telling? Okay, so Keenan Bailey has told Cade Stover, the words he has said maybe the most to Cade Stover is get uncomfortable. And what he means by get uncomfortable is, okay, you didn't go off to the NFL. You came back. Why'd you come back? Because you want to get better. So Keenan Bailey said every time Cade Stover is in a drill where he feels like he can exhale, and it's like, okay, I know this one, it's fine, I got it. Keenan Bailey has failed in his job, because his job is to get Cade Stover better. So he's constantly pushing Cade Stover to just keep working on route running, keep working on, he said they're kind of up to graduate level route running courses. He was in a little bit more of the, 101 and 201 kind of stuff a year ago. They're into the kind of graduate school level route running courses now. But okay, now let's see you try and beat a cornerback, because now you're not going to be able to run past the guy. So now you got to be a little more physical and take advantage of that. Just kind of constantly finding ways to challenge Cade Stover, and I feel like you sort of know what you have with him, where he's going to be a very high floor guy, where you've seen him. He had 2 touchdown catches against Wisconsin last year, for example. You've seen him in the open field. There's a lot he can bring to this team. And then now it's just a matter of, okay, getting a little bit better with that. What did Cade have to tell you?
Well, he talked a little bit about being the uncomfortableness, just the wanting to get better in all aspects. And did a lot of conditioning with the receivers. He's always running with the receivers, and that's where he also talked about, I'm in better shape now to where I can come back from a 50-yard route and I'm not huffing and puffing. He also said that allows him to talk more to the defense when you're in better shape. You can do that between plays and you're not huffing and puffing. You can do things that are more constructive, like talk trash, which is, a good thing. And somebody asked him, how are you different than a year ago? And he's like, well, you're older and my beard is bigger. He's like, but other things as well. Not just the 2 most important aspects of improvement, but a guy who's really, really comfortable in himself now and comfortable doing this, but also the uncomfortable nature of wanting to do different things on the field and being a part of that. I think he's, he talked about he looks forward to camp, but at some point you just, because it's closer to the game, you just want to get to the game. You're doing all of this. He loves it. It's different than the off-season workouts, but you get to a point where you're ready to. You just have this excitement that you want to take it out on the opponent. And he said one of the things that has driven him most is the loss to Michigan last year, because you have to own it. Mm-hmm. You take ownership of it, and you use it, and that's one of the things that he's put behind him to push him forward.
And, at the end of that Michigan game, he had the one play in the end zone where a Michigan DB came in and knocked the ball away from him, made a really good play. The last interception, I think it was, kind of went off of his fingertips. He reached as high as he could and just about got it and ended up deflecting it, and Michigan ended up with an interception. So, yeah, he was involved in that game right down to the end, and so, yeah, I'm sure he's taken that a little bit personally. You mentioned earlier how this is a little bit of a top-heavy room, and Keenan Bailey talked about the fact that Cade Stover, I think he said, played 58 plays on average last year. And that's across the whole season. He missed a bunch of time in the Georgia game. He missed, he was not playing necessarily a ton in the second half against Rutgers or some of the teams where they're up by 1 million points. Keenan Bailey talked about the fact that, man, he really wants to get that number down for Cade Stover. If you can get 20 plays off of that, you go from 58 to 38 plays. Okay, well, then you're a lot fresher during the fourth quarter of the games. You're a lot fresher during the course of the season. But if you're going to do that, well, you need the other guys to be able to step up, and you need Joe Royer, and you need G. Scott to be able to step up and really be able to take those reps. You got a chance to talk to Royer a bunch. We mentioned that he was, feeling better and is out there now. Where do things stand with him right now? How is his camp going?
Well, and he's another guy that has gotten bigger, gotten stronger. He played receiver in high school, so this has been a long-ish process for him to get to the point where he can play every down and be out there whenever he is called upon. Last year, personally lost his mother, so it was not a year that was conducive to any kind of, almost anything in terms of helping the team, helping himself. But, you grow from that, and as he said, like, having that happen, like, nothing really can now, like alter him in terms of everything that comes now he knows he can handle, and so you grow that way. And so he's involved, getting better, as everybody says. You've got to be able to block these defensive ends. And he talked about the first time, his first real bunch of snaps as a tight end at Ohio State in a practice. Zach Harrison took him about 10 yards into the backfield. and he dropped an HS on that one. So that was the one that caught him off guard, and so that's the baptism by fire that we talked about yesterday. He certainly has received that, but continues to grow, and the confidence that Keenan Bailey talks about him with, and like I think we say top heavy, but I think you have G. Scott, Joe Royer, Cade Stover. I think they're comfortable playing those guys. We saw G. Scott play a bunch last year. I think you're going to see that the case with Joe Royer this year. And I think the sign that things are good is when they have a 12 personnel package and Cade Stover's on the sidelines. I don't expect it a lot, but
yeah, but whenever you see that, that's a positive sign. And if they're just comfortable working in 12 personnel a lot this year, because they have a bunch of talented wide receivers on this team. They have a bunch of talented running backs on this team. There's nothing that says they couldn't be in 11 personnel or 21 personnel. 11, we'll define our terms here. 11 is one running back, one wide receiver, and thus the implied number is 3 for three.
One running back, one tight end.
I'm sorry, one running back, one tight end. The implied number being 3 for wide receivers. 21 personnel would be 2 running backs, 1 tight end, 2 wide receivers. If they feel like it's worth having 2 tight ends out there this year, and and you're keeping a wide receiver off the field, or you're keeping an extra running back off the field. That's I don't know how much we're going to see that this year, but if we see that in something other than goal line type of situations, then that's probably a pretty good indication that they really do have a little more depth than we're maybe thinking right now.
Well, and it might be the way to go early in the season when you may need that extra blocker, you need that extra tight end in there to help the running game, just to establish and set the tone. As Ryan Day we talked with him about a couple days ago. I wrote about it on Wednesday. Just the idea that they need to figure out what their identity is. They need to find their fastball, and having that extra tight end out there could help them do it. As it in terms of the running game, help them out there.
And then the third guy in that sort of triumvirate at tight end, G. Scott, talked to him a little bit. He said a phrase that we've heard Keenan Bailey use in conjunction with him, and then him using that phrase as well, be the best version of myself. And he was asked what that means, and he said it is like everything. He's taking a very holistic approach. It is mind, body, and soul. Talked about his faith and how his faith has kind of helped him. He said you're going to go through some hardships, just having a better understanding that this is all for a bigger purpose, and not necessarily. It is very easy when you were a star high school football player, top 100 kind of recruit, to define yourself as I'm a football player. And he said, at some point the football goes away, and then you don't have anything to find as a base. So he said that was very important. He again, how every position group, we can usually tell what they're talking about in the meeting rooms and in these conversations, behind closed doors, by what we hear and how we hear. You always get these consistent themes that sort of come out over the course of camp. Ryan Day, when he was talking about the quarterbacks, talked about the importance of consistency, who can consistently make plays. G. Scott talked about the fact that you've got to show up day in, day out. You have to
stack
be
days.
able to stack days, exactly. And we're hearing that over and over again. I think that's when you think about last year, that's kind of makes sense, where they had these really good moments, and then you have the really bad moments here and there, and the bad moments will catch you. If you can just avoid the bad moments, if you can just be consistently good, and consistently good and sometimes great, that's going to get you further than sometimes great and sometimes bad. And I think that is sort of developing as one of the themes of the season already.
Ryan Day loves to use his baseball analogies. If you're just strong up the middle with the glove, it'll make up for maybe not being so strong with the bat.
Yeah. And he was asked, also G. Scott, of course, a native of the state of Washington, was asked about his home state, Washington Huskies, suddenly being a Big Ten team, and they'll be in the Big Ten. He has this year and then potentially one more year after this, so he could end up playing Washington as a conference game. Not something he was necessarily expecting when he was going through the recruiting process. But said, that is, his like home base of schools, all of those big West Coast schools, Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA, those were like the home teams when he was a kid. So now they're in the conference. Thought that was, not something he was expecting. We'll see whether he's actually, going to get to play them. But he said even when he was going through recruiting, Ohio State had a series with Washington on the schedule, 2025 and 26, I believe, or 2024 and 25. And he said that was something he was looking at and like, looking forward to those games. And those games got canceled a little while ago, but now maybe you do get to go to Washington in 2025. So
just interesting that he leaves for the Big Ten, and then all of those schools do as well. Is it connected?
Almost undoubtedly, yes. Yeah, G. Scott and Brutus Buckeye with Puddles the Duck. I mean, we can either stand here and do the Charlie Day with the string thing, or we can just wrap it up. I vote for wrapping it up.
Can I say one last thing? I asked Cade Stover. Cade Stover talked a lot about the defense. Really excited about the defense. Said they're going to be good this year, that sort of thing. I did ask him, how often do you cross paths with Sonny Styles? He said, a lot, yeah. And so just keep an eye out. Another word of cautionary, excitement, cautious excitement there about Sonny Styles. I thought I'd just throw that in there as well.
Restrained exuberance.
There you go, perfect.
Feels like yes. And so now we've talked about Sonny Styles. Now we have met our
you could throw that in the title.
USDA requirement of your daily allowance of Sonny Styles content. So now we can wrap it up. So thank you guys all for joining us. You can join us also at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where we have a fantastic team of insiders covering recruiting and X's and O's covering the team. Very active board. Have had a lot of stuff to talk about this week, and more stuff coming potentially. A major commitment potentially coming in a week or so, and then of course the season. 16 days away. Boy, it is getting real close. We're at the point where it's like, we need to figure out restaurants and not just when we're going and where we're going and all that kind of stuff. Season is almost here. You should be there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.